Kokoli. And now Gama Mama G with libations.
Greetings. We give thanks for this day. Give thanks for this gathering, this circle. Give thanks for life. Give thanks for journey mercy that enabled us to be here. This morning we ask, as we come into this room, that justice will be done. We ask that all injustice will be nullified unto our people, and that this gathering will bring cooperation, collaboration, and further healing. Ashe, give thanks.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Melanie Elaine of Freedom Imaginaries, and I'm honored to present the delegation of Indigenous leaders who will address you on the human rights of Indigenous, Taino, and Maroon peoples in Jamaica. In person, I'm delighted to be here with Kasike Kalan, Taino chief of the Jamaican Hummingbird tribe, and Gloria Mamaji Sims, paramount queen of the Maroons, as well as our supporters from the Garavuna Nation. And from Jamaica, Commissioners, we have pre-recorded greetings from the colonels of Jamaica's Maroon communities, and so I invite you to listen to their greetings on video.
Mabrika, Taikotakina Diri, Kasike Eani Yamiwani. What I've just said in my own Taina language is, greetings. My name is Kaikotakina. Kaikotakina means island food teacher. I am the chieftainess of Yamiwani. That is Jamaica Hummingbird Taino people.
My name is Marcia Douglas, currently the chief or colonel of the Charleston Maroon community.
Good day, everyone. My name is Wally Sterling, and I'm the chief of the Moortown Maroons. And this Moortown encompasses more than just one community. It's most of the community in the upper part of the Rio Grande Valley, in the parish of Portland in Jamaica.
Yes, I am Lloyd Latimer, the chief of the Scotsall Maroon. Scotsall is located in southeastern St. Mary, and a population of about, I would say, 3,000 people, because the community has narrowed down. But the space, the wider space that Scotsall takes up, it's about 6,000 to 7,000 people.
And Commissioners, I now turn to Kasike Kalan, who will briefly discuss the history of the Indigenous Taino and Maroon peoples. And after that introduction, we will highlight priority issues affecting the rights of Indigenous Taino and Maroon people in Jamaica, including from an intersectional perspective that highlights the experiences of Indigenous women.
Jamaica was originally inhabited by the Tainos, historically but inaccurately also called Arawaks. In 1494, Jamaica was claimed by Spain, who in short order put the peaceful Tainos to do free labor for the emerging gold industry. Though the Spanish invaders caused the death of the majority of the Tainos in Jamaica in the early 1500s, we did not all perish. The first Maroons in Jamaica were therefore the Tainos, who escaped the arriving Spanish and their encomienda system into the mountainous interior of Jamaica. Colonial narratives falsely assert indigenous extinction by as early as 1520. However, archaeological evidence suggests small Taino populations existed during this period. Census records also report Indian populations alongside enslaved Africans in Sevilla La Nueva in Jamaica in 1533. During the colonial onslaught, the indigenous people existed in the mountains, on the coast, remote fishing villages, and in plain sight. Indigenous people of Jamaica have never been extinct. In 1655, England wrested away Jamaica from Spain, adding it to its Caribbean colonies, and in the process waged war for over 85 years against the Maroons. So as to sustain its colonial sugar-based industries, England sought to replenish the severely diminished labor force by importing Africans into Jamaica to work the plantations and keep the wheels of colonial enterprise turning. Continuous resistance and escape by the increasing number of enslaved Africans led to the expansion of Maroon settlements in the mountainous interior. Many of the early Africans having run away to the interior to join Amerindian communities or Yamé Taino communities. Jamaica's Maroons of today are therefore descendants of Jamaica's first peoples, as well as descendants of self-liberated enslaved people, indigenous to Africa, who have retained African identities through spirituality, ties to the land, social and political organization, medicinal healing practices, dress, music, dance, and language. Gama Mama G.
In Jamaica, 2 treaties were signed historically between the British colonial government and the Maroons. One in 1738 with the Leeward Maroons in the western interior of Jamaica in and around the Cockpit country, and the other in 1739 with the Windward Maroons in the eastern interior of Jamaica and in and around the Blue and John Crow Mountains. The Maroons Treaty recognized Maroon liberty, freedom, self-governance, and ownership of land. Today, Yankunkung Pikibu Maroons continue to claim our rights to self-determination and to govern and occupy our treaty lands. The Yankunkung Pikibu Maroon also maintain a unique system of communal held treaty lands as part of our ancestral heritage and collective identity. Although related, the Taino and Maroon communities of Jamaica are distinct communities. Applying the International Labour Organization ILO Convention number 169 on indigenous and tribal peoples in independent countries, the Taino clearly qualify as indigenous. The Maroon can also be considered as indigenous to Jamaica on account of being descendant from the original Taino and our retention of our own social, economic, cultural, and political institution. Maroons in Jamaica, however, can also be considered as tribal peoples based on the fact that our status is regulated partially by our own customs and tradition and by special laws or regulations.
However, despite the Tainos being featured on the coat of arms of Jamaica and the Maroon national heroine featured on the national $500 note, the Tainos and Maroons of Jamaica have suffered from the racist laws, policies, and legacies of colonial and post-colonial governments of Jamaica and its land, social, cultural, and religious biases and discriminatory practices. The government of Jamaica, from colonial times to the present, has blindly accepted and wrongfully perpetuated the myth of indigenous extinction in Jamaica. It has never acknowledged that Tainos continue to exist or that Maroons are entitled to the rights of indigenous and tribal peoples. In its recent review of Jamaica, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination expressed concern about the government of Jamaica's refusal to recognize Maroons and Tainos as indigenous peoples. Please note that the government of Jamaica had referred to us as indigenous culture. Jamaica's constitution and laws do not recognize, guarantee, or protect the rights of indigenous peoples under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, such as our right to self-identify as indigenous and our rights to self-determination, autonomy, ownership, and control of our ancestral lands and resources. There's no mention of Taino in early childhood education system in Jamaica. This is a part of what can be called paper genocide, perpetuating the myth of Taino extinction. In this structural context, the indigenous people in Jamaica are exposed to serious threats to our way of life, as we will now discuss.
So as Kasika Kalan said, a major structural issue is that Jamaica's domestic legal framework does not recognize the communal land rights of the Maroons. And there is an urgent need to demarcate, legally recognize, and protect the boundaries of Maroon lands. And we have a video from Colonel Sterling and Lati Bodair from Jamaica to talk about the structural issue and how it manifests in their communities.
One of the major problems that we have facing our community at this point in time is the matter of land tenure. All four parents had an agreement with the colonial government that they signed in 1739, on the 23rd of June, and it gave up our forefathers a total autonomy over the communities that they preside. And there was nothing in that agreement that says that our forefathers should have paid taxes for any portion of the land that they occupied under that treaty. Successive governments over the years have tried to abrogate that aspect and tried to collect taxes from the people for land that they are not supposed to be paying taxes.
I think that most of what's on the treaty will cover most of the problems that we're having. Again, the land is one of the biggest issues because we don't know where the boundaries were. So we're supposed to identify the boundaries. It never happened, but we'd like to revisit that offer. We acknowledge that a lot of this land might be personally owned, but I don't think all of it is at this point. I would like to reestablish the boundaries that was given to us, and then we'll visit to see who owns what and how they acquired.
So as a result, there is no legal clarity regarding Maroon land rights. Maroons have no recognized collective title to their traditional lands, which is still considered crown or state lands, while the government continues to issue land titles over Maroon lands to individuals without any respect for or reference to the Maroon leadership. These are very serious issues negatively affecting the survival of all Maroon communities in Jamaica. One of the most urgent manifestations of this structural issue is the granting of mining concessions over the ancestral lands of the Maroons in the cockpit country without their free, prior, and informed consent. Mining in the cockpit country presents serious threats of irreparable harm to the Maroons and their way of life. Mining will cause irreversible social and environmental damage while threatening one of the most valuable areas for biodiversity conservation. I'll now hand over to Mama G, who will provide an intersectional perspective focusing on Indigenous women's rights.
Indigenous women play a crucial role in preserving our culture. Since they are the bearers and keepers of Indigenous knowledge, the structural issue that we have been discussing about the lack of recognition as a disproportionate native impact on Indigenous women and our ability to pass down our Indigenous knowledge from one generation to the next. We will start with a brief statement from Chieftainess Ronalda Pearman and priorities issues affecting Indigenous women in Jamaica.
What are some of the major issues that is affecting Indigenous women today? Our right to our own bodies, our right to our own birthing experiences, and the right to teach our children the way how we traditionally do.
For the Taino and Maroon communities, birth and death are ceremonies. However, too often, Taino and Maroons are denied our home birth ceremonies. Home birth and natural births are outright discouraged by health and government officials. Indigenous women are often told that they must have cesarean sections. After birth at public and private hospitals, many mothers are forced to give a natural milk formula to our newborns and even deny the right to leave the hospital until they have fed the child, the formula. Another major issue is the policing of the Maroon communities. In recent years, the Maroon communities of Jamaica have experienced increased policing by and conflict with the police, which the state have not sought to resolve. For example, in December 2014, 2 captains of the Charlestown Maroon Council were arrested and charged in Charlestown Maroon community by the police for possession and smoking of a small amount, minute amount of ganja. In November 2018, the colonel of the Charlestown Maroon and 2 captains of the Charlestown Maroon Council were arrested and charged in Charlestown Maroon community by the police for indecent language and malicious destruction of property, stemming from an incident in which the police attempted to shut down a Maroon event in a hostile manner, disrespecting the Maroon communities and the Maroon traditional leadership in the process.
I'll touch on the deterioration that we've experienced with our connections with the state. Collectively, all of the above has contributed to the continuation of the denial by the majority of the public of the existence of Tainos in Jamaica. And to many persons of Taino and Maroon descent feeling unwilling to self-identify as Taino and/or Maroon due to fear of ridicule in the school system, the workplace, and the wider Jamaican society. This has contributed to a denial of recognition of cultural and intellectual property of Tainos and Maroons. Our community members fear to openly practice our traditions as it may be seen as Obia and fall under the Obia Act of 1898. And they fear if they share with others about our ancestral inherited spaces, the government will seek to claim it because of what may be buried there. The Taino and Maroon vision of autonomy, consistent with the rights of indigenous people, as articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, is the ability of our communities to have our history, ancestry, rights, and leaders respected, our voices considered in matters affecting us, management of our communities and ancestral sites, and freedom to preserve and share our medicines, spiritual and cultural practices freely. In light of the above, we respectfully request the IACHR to call upon the government of Jamaica to recognize the rights of its indigenous peoples, the Yenkunkumpikibo Maroons and the Yame Taino, and to take the following actions. 1, recognition the indigenous rights of Taino and Maroon peoples in Jamaica in accordance with the AD-RIP and UND-RIP. 2, engage in meaningful and constructive dialogue with the Yenkunkumpikibo Maroons and Yame Taino with the purpose of initiating a process of truth-telling, reconciliation, resolution of our land and self-determination claims, and collaboration on issues of mutual concern. Adopt constitutional and legislative provisions to A, guarantee the rights of the Yenkunkumpikibo Maroons and Yame Taino to our lands, territories, and resources, and to protect us from illegal encroachment. And B, ensure that our communities can fully contribute to the development of the country and that our free, prior, and informed consent is required before any development or extractive projects affecting our traditional lands and resources are initiated. 5, establish a framework of engagement between the government of Jamaica, its ministries, departments, agencies, and law enforcement on the one hand, and indigenous peoples on the other, in accordance with Jamaica's international obligations. Refrain from the use of force. This is 6. Refrain from the use of force, harassment, and intimidation by law enforcement officials against Maroons and Taino people who defend our land. 7. Withdraw the cabinet, office, directive, and any public statements urging government ministries, departments, and agencies not to work with the Maroons or any group claiming to be indigenous, nor to sponsor any programs or projects that will include Maroons.
And apologize to Maroons community on these issues.
Muy bien.
Very well. That is all the time. So now in the second round, you will be able to conclude Now, we will give the floor via our technological means to the illustrious representatives of the state of Jamaica who will be presenting their positions via this means.
Hello, good afternoon. Are you hearing me? Thank you. First Vice President, Commissioner Esmeralda de Tluitinia, Rapporteur for Jamaica, Commissioner Roberta Clark, other commissioners, petitioners, good afternoon. The government of Jamaica acknowledges the decision of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to convene a hearing today to hear the submission of the Maroon Indigenous Women's Circle and the Yamaya Council of Indigenous Leaders, despite our request for a postponement. The submission has been perused, and the government of Jamaica respectfully requests that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights permit us to respond appropriately in writing at a later date, given that the request for delay of the hearing of this matter was not accommodated on this occasion. Madam Commissioner, the Constitution of Jamaica protects the fundamental rights and freedoms of all Jamaicans and all persons in Jamaica under Chapter 3, which is commonly referred to as the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. Notably, we believe it is important to highlight the following fundamental rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter. 1, freedom of thought, consciousness, belief, and observance of political doctrine. 2, the right to equality before the law. 3, the right to freedom of discrimination on the ground of being male or female, race, place of origin, social class, color, religion, or political opinions. And 4, the right to enjoy a healthy and productive environment, free from the threat of injury or damage from environmental abuse and the degradation of the ecological heritage. In this regard, the members of the Maroon Indigenous Women's Circle and the Yamaya Council of Indigenous Leaders are able to exercise all of their constitutionally protected rights and freedoms, as well as all other rights established by the laws of the country. And we assert, therefore, that no claim of discrimination can rightly be made against the state. Notably, one Maroon community has in fact exercised its right to equality before the law by instituting a claim before domestic courts, which raises several issues that will also rise in the hearing today. This therefore means that the government of Jamaica cannot address these issues at this time before the Commission. And we again reiterate the request to allow Jamaica to provide submissions in writing at a later date, when the state is able to address the issues in a fulsome manner before this Commission. In the meantime, the government of Jamaica remains open to engage in meaningful and constructive dialogue with the Maroon Indigenous Women's Circle and the Yamaya Council of Indigenous Leaders to discuss their issues and concerns. We trust that the Commission will consider favorably the request for Jamaica to submit a more detailed response in writing. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other intervention? If there is no more intervention by the state, we will now continue with the hearing. We are taking notes of what the representative of the illustrious state of Jamaica has presented in order to respond in greater detail subsequently. With the continuation of this hearing, we will now give the Commission the opportunity to participate, to be able to have an exchange with you all. I will take the floor in my role as Rapporteur for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I would like to express my profound sense of solidarity with the statements that have been made in a claim in defense of your rights, and I will begin with the last statement by the representative of the government of the state of Jamaica, opening up to dialogue. Hearings as a tool that the Commission have this objective, a fundamental objective, to be able to place both parties in a position of dialogue. The petitioners have, through their requests, expressed the need to emphasize precisely this formula of a constructive dialogue, one that is respectful, trustworthy, in order to address from their experience and lives, from their communities. You have presented today this information to the Commission. On this opportunity, I would like to hear from you what your opinion is, what your analysis is regarding the impact that this has of not being recognized as the Taino and Maroon peoples, not being recognized as indigenous peoples. You have detailed the history of the formation of the peoples. So what, according to your experiences and lives that you have had, and precisely in your efforts to have your rights respected, what are the limits and obstacles that you have found in relation to this lack of recognition of your status or qualification, being recognized or not as indigenous peoples? This would be one point. And a second question would be regarding the concept of the state's responsibility in relation to the compliance and fulfillment of the agreements and declarations and regulations in order to precisely give the indigenous peoples their rights to autonomy, to self-determination, in all of the senses and topics that make up part of your ancestral cultures, the issues of education, health, protection, environmental protection, and protection of territory. The evaluation that you all have made of the compliance or non-compliance by the state and this recognition of an identity, a cultural identity, and its autonomy and forms of governance in order to demand your rights. That would be to have this opportunity, and then my colleagues can use the floor and you will have time to respond. So immediately I will give the floor to the second Vice President of the Commissioner, Roberta Clark, in her role as Rapporteur for the state of Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Arosemena, and are we in the afternoon? I'm still on Caribbean time, but I believe we are almost approaching the afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone here with us and also online, to the representatives of the state of Jamaica. I want to start off by saying how humble I am to be in this hearing and to listen to you very carefully. I think in a sense this is a historic hearing for the commission, and I want to recognize that and also appreciate your own recognition of the first peoples of Jamaica, the Taino, as freedom fighters and as the first Maroons. I like that formulation of it. And also, therefore, also to recognize the Maroons, what we consider the African Maroons as freedom fighters. The first freedom fighters, I think, really across the Caribbean, or one of the first freedom fighters across the Caribbean, fighting enslavement and demanding their freedom and their autonomy and their equality and their dignity. And that is the history that you seek to continue in your current struggles and your current articulation of your individual and collective rights. So I just want to start off by saying that. There are some questions that I have, and I do also want to reiterate Commissioner Arosemena's request of you to maybe speak a little bit more about what are the obstacles that you're facing to the recognition of your collective rights. You did mention some cultural obstacles and also some legal obstacles, and the cultural obstacles which may also be grounded in the legal barriers that you face. So, for example, the criminalization, the colonial criminalization of cultural practices such as, you said, obia. So I also want to ask you, what is the status of that legislation? Is it current, and is it being implemented? Now, even when legislation is not being implemented, its very existence creates the possibility and the climate for discrimination and stigmatization. But I would really like to hear a little bit more about what is the status of that law, and what are your thoughts on how that should be addressed. I also want to recognize your demand for recognition of other forms of cultural practice in relation to how women's autonomy over their bodies and how children are raised, and the education, the nature of education to which children are entitled, education that honors the background, the history and the culture. Two questions. In relation to the question of right to land, to which you spoke, I know that there may not be a precise kind of calculation or definition of what that territory looks like, but what I would like to hear from you, what you estimate that territory looks like, and what has been the status historically of your claim, to that collective claim that you have to certain parts of the land of Jamaica. What has been the history of that demand and the response of the state to that demand? And my second question related to something that you said towards the end of your presentation, that you wanted to enter the cabinet directive not to work with Maroon peoples. So I would like to hear a little bit more about that. That seems rather extraordinary from what you've said. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that directive, as well as when was it formulated and how has it been implemented. And then in relation to the representatives of the state, and you did take us through parts of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Jamaican Constitution, and you spoke about a number of individual freedoms, but my sense of it is that the representatives here of the Taino and Maroon peoples are not talking about individual rights, but collective rights, which they are articulating is encompassed in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, whilst these are not treaties and conventions in the way in which we understand that, the adoption or the participation of Jamaica in the articulation of these declarations may raise an expectation. And I wanted to ask the representative of the state, how do they see these declarations applying to Jamaica and the articulation of the rights of Taino and Indigenous and Maroon peoples in Jamaica, as we've heard from today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And
The floor is on Commissioner Joel Hernandez.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Greetings to the Mara Indigenous Women's Circle and the Yamaya Council of Indigenous Leaders. I hereby recognize this petition for a hearing that you made before this commission. This is a very important hearing for the commission, without question, for the rest of the indigenous people in America, as Commissioner Esmeralda Rosamena has mentioned. This hearing, of course, has a historic meaning that's very important. And thanks to you, a lot of the people here present, me included, have been able to know a little bit about the history of Jamaica, a history tightly associated with colonialism that for so many centuries dominated a region. And now it has to be recognized, has to be acknowledged, and we have to engage in all actions and measurements that the international community, through different international organizations, has been recognizing the indigenous people so that they can live the rights, the autonomy, the rights to autonomy as indigenous people. And history has determined that you are an autonomous people. I want to take this opportunity and this hearing as a start point for something very important. I hope this starts a dialogue. I have been highly motivated by the presentation by the distinguished representative from Jamaica, Nicolette Williams, because it has shown all of us, and it has been recognized here, that there's a willingness to engage in a dialogue, and a real, authentic, and constructive dialogue. That in itself is the main goal of these hearings, to start having a dialogue. Of course, it's a long way to travel, but at the same time, the way you have traveled to come to this opportunity and this moment has been long, but it's worth engaging in it and starting this dialogue with the state. Commissioner Clark mentioned the expectations that this generates, that Jamaica supported the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and the American Commission without even going into the judicial analysis of these declarations. The mere fact that your participants and co-signers actually generates very, very important and strong expectations for the community in general in Jamaica and for the indigenous people, of course, particularly. I would like to have this declaration offered by the state of Jamaica in answer to this hearing. I think it's going to be very important for us to understand the entire issue. And very respectfully, I would like to suggest to the state, to ask them to explain to us how the state of Jamaica, as an independent state, comes from the British Crown, which supported the treaties in the 18th century involving the Taino and Maroon peoples in Jamaica. Because I believe that is a historic fact and a legal fact that's very important that cannot be ignored. I really hope that all this drives us in a direction that will take us to the basic step, which is the possibility of have you really exercise your right to self-governing. And starting from there, we have to have the recognition of collective rights also. It's clear to us that there's individual rights that are being protected by the Constitution, the laws in Jamaica, but we're talking about a different kind of rights. This is a different dimension, the collective rights. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Thank you, Commissioner. And now we're going to hear from Commissioner Carlos Bernal.
I just want to acknowledge
the importance of this hearing, and thank you for bringing us this matter to our attention. In the same line of Commissioner Hernandez, I would like to encourage the government of Jamaica to begin a serious process of meaningful engagement with the Maroon community for the sake of the acknowledgement of the rights. I am aware that Jamaica is not a party of the ILO Convention 169. That's a fact. However, within the realm of the Inter-American System of Human Rights, and also within the realm of the Commonwealth states, there has been a huge amount of progress in the recognition of all indigenous rights. For instance, it is not we cannot underestimate the importance of the two cases, MAVO 1 and MAVO 2 in Australia, that acknowledge the rights of the indigenous people of the peoples of the Northern Territories. And right now, as many of you know, in Australia, there is a huge discussion on the proposal of the so-called The Voice, which is an initiative to entrench in the Constitution the rights of indigenous peoples in Australia. So in the Commonwealth, in the realm of the Commonwealth, there is the recognition to reinvigorate, as a matter of justice and fairness, the recognition of the indigenous rights and to enhance the protections of the rights at all levels. So I think this implies a unique opportunity for the current government of Jamaica to make justice to the Maroon community and to at least to engage in a minimum in a process of meaningful engagement with the community to address all the issues. Now, having said that, I just would like to ask one question: is whether the petitioners and also the state can give us a little bit more of information about domestic processes and initiatives of that meaningful engagement, whether there is any. I heard by the representative of the state that there is a case pending in court. Can we get more information about that? And also, I would like to know whether there has been any process that has been initiated either within the realm or the framework of the Parliament, and also concerning the role of the public administration. I would like more information about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't know if the Secretariat has a participation here. Yes, thank you, First Vice President. Welcome, everybody, to this hearing. Firstly, we want to mention to you that today, present here, there are students from this university, and I'm sure that for the first time, they have access to this dialogue, this conversation. They're hearing for the first time about the indigenous people in Jamaica. What you have done today is also to show to all these people, these young people who we want to get involved with the system. You have shown them what's happening in certain countries belonging to this region, something that we very seldom hear about, or we don't turn our attention to them for different reasons. Now, I have a question, and I would also make a comment. December of 2022, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights published the text, "The Right to Free Determination of Indigenous and Tribal Peoples." We would like to give you this text. It's in our website. It's both in English and available in English and in Spanish, but we want to refer to this to use it as an important instrument to be used by you. This has compared experiences of all other indigenous people in the region in their struggle to assert self-governance about the land, their structure, their culture, and the life forms. It will be very important for you to have this. We also want to address the representative of this state that we are awaiting for information, all the information that you have offered to send us in writing. But we also want to offer this representative from the state time and effort to have a common effort, something that will also incorporate and include the representatives of the Taíno and Cimarron people. We understand that the Jamaican Constitution protects freedoms and rights, and there is a formal prohibition against discrimination. But I also understand that those people who are here today are not talking about a legal or judicial prohibitions, but an everyday discrimination. My question, therefore, is, could you please explain to us a little more detail the effects of criminalizing your cultural practices, defending the right to your land, your way of life, and your self-governance? Can you tell us about your experiences, some of your experiences, so that we can get closer what the representative of the state is talking about, the prohibition of discrimination, and also the daily discrimination you suffer. Thank you, and thank you for the ritual starting this hearing, which it's been beautiful. It has excited all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Now, the special repertoire of the socioeconomic and environment declaration has the microphone. Thank you, Madam Vice President. It is such an honor to be present here as part of the participants in this hearing to hear your testimonies. I have two specific questions. Given the importance of the indigenous peoples in America and the world fighting the weather change, we want to know what's your participation, what's your role trying to help Jamaica to fight against these climate changes, using your cultural practices and your knowledge about nature. How do you protect nature? And I would like to hear probably get more information about your fears about the intellectual property, the cultural rights, how you are being affected, or your rights are being affected. And also put in the radar the Inter-American standards and the resolution about a climate emergency. I believe that's a very important instrument for you and for the entire indigenous peoples. Thank you. Thank you. Well, now the petitioners will have the floor, and I want to hear, I know we have limited times. However, any information we cannot complete or obtain today will be very useful in the near future if you can send it to us in writing.
So we will respond to the questions of the commissioners. Could you remind me of how much time we have to respond, please?
You will have 10 minutes.
Very much, commissioners. I'd like to start first with a statement of support on the question of recognition, and immediately after that, we will respond to the specific question about the impact of the non-recognition of Indigenous rights in Jamaica. So I hand over the floor for a statement of support.
Muchas gracias. Estamos aquí con...
As we have said, we are here on behalf of the International Council of First Nations, a council which was formed in 2018 during the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Matters in the United Nations, with the Indigenous peoples who came from all parts of the world to present their ideas, their complaints, and especially to seek an alliance with other peoples to be recognized. One important point is that we recognize that based on the recognition which sometimes we request or we want to be given, the important thing is to have the recognition amongst ourselves as peoples, which is taking place. So the groups that we represent groups on all 5 continents. We are 100% behind this effort by the Maroon and Taino people in Jamaica, because we see them as an example, a model of what can be proposed that can be followed in many other places with the peoples of Mexico, the United States, and South America and Central America. And everywhere, we all are in the same situation. In this sense, we are greatly thankful that the idea of the rights of the First Nations, as we call them, indigenous peoples, has been taken more seriously. And one of these rights that we are seeking is to have recognition. In addition to cultural elements, we have cultural, even territorial elements, but not legal elements. So we can't change things as they are on our own. That's why we are here with you all to extend our hands to all of you as if we were all one person. And this matter of the environment is very important, because the only way that the environment can be straightened out, sorted out, is by the guardians of the land, of the earth. Unfortunately, in more than 500 years here on this part of the globe, our peoples have suffered, but an important thing is that we have never fainted. We have never given up. We are still on our feet. But especially we have the greatest disposition and availability to unite our efforts and to remove the things that divide us from one another, and to seek sovereignty especially. So it's very important to me on this day to share that we are here on the day known as 7 Crocodile, and a time of the last 5 days of what we call the Aztec calendar. These are special days. They are days for reflection, adjustment, and balance. So today we are honored to be here with you all, and our chief representative, also with the traditional name of the crocodile or alligator, Caiman. So we support all of you. We support you 100%, but we want to join hands with you all. There's another situation that I think is very important, which is these sacred elements. For instance, we have sacred things here that have been given to us or left to us, or we have inherited, but often we have issues crossing borders with these things. They try to treat it as if it were luggage. But as I mentioned, we are more than willing to improve this world so that these young people and other young people who are hearing us in other places will know that we have that right and responsibility. So again, I'll say on this day, this is the beginning of the Nemotemis, the 5 days for reflection, for seeking balance and adjustment in this conference at this time. So time is on our side. Time is our greatest friend, but time is not going to wait for us either. Tlasokamati, thank you very much.
At large for the Garifuna Nation.
Okay, as Ambassador at Large for the Garifuna Nation, and also my brother representing our president, we stand close with the Taino and Maroon people, and we have taken the initiative around the region of the Caribbean to establish what is United Maroons and Indigenous People. Garifuna Nation embraces Garifuna people all around the world. There are 1 million of us around the world. And the uniqueness of Garifuna from Belize is that we are a bridge between other indigenous people like the Maya. We have almost 1 million Maya people living here in the United States. So we offer the support, although it is a specific discussion for the people in Jamaica. We are one, we connect as one, and we give the support. We have had conversation with CARICOM this morning about sending information about this hearing around the region and around the world. And our intent is to take the conversation as indigenous-led, with no disrespect meant, but defining the protocols of what it means to be indigenous. Finally, that we will be honored, respected as peoples. We are not considered peoples, we are considered cultures. So when the Taino and the Maroons in Jamaica suffer, we suffer too, because they are our relatives. This is a healing journey for us.
Thank you very much. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I will invite Mama G to address the question on the non-recognition of Indigenous people in Jamaica and what it means in terms of obstacles.
Yeah, greetings again. The lack of recognition as Indigenous people has really taken a big impact on us. It stops us from moving forward in doing the work that we are commissioned to do. As stewardess of the land, we cannot able to carry out the work in dealing with the land climate change the way we are supposed to because of lack of recognition. Some of the areas that we should be working with, like the forestry department and these things, we are not a part of these things. We are not a part of the land commission or any one of these things, you know, because of lack of recognition. Because of lack of recognition, we recognize that there's a domestic case up to the time, but we could not stay just to deal with that domestic case if we are not recognized, as it was said in the review to the United Nations third report, as a people. There's nothing for us to exercise in our own country domestically if we are not recognized by them. So that's why we are here today, you know, to take it on this level, because we need recognition from our own people, where the history has born and live and where we are. If we are not recognized domestically there, then where can we go, you know? So the impact is very big. It also brings an impact between our own communities where we have conflict and disputes because of the lack of recognition. There's dispute even amongst our own people in the different Maroon communities also.
Yeah, to touch on that briefly, I think it should be said on the record that the community that has the case with the government of Jamaica is not one of those being represented here now today. And one of the consequences of that court case is that we are there are certain levels of engagement that we would have had previously, which have been revoked, such as the cabinet order that was issued stating that any community that is stating that they are Maroon or Indigenous, that they have to check with the Attorney General for funding that they would have normally had access to. And the only reason that these things would be an issue to us now is because there's nothing in law that constitutes our rights. So they can put out these cabinet orders, and then it creates this fear amongst the government officials on should we continue to interact with these communities or not. I wanted to just state here clearly that, you know, obviously Yame Taino under the Yame Wani Council and our membership are Indigenous people of Jamaica, and our relatives, the Nkunkung Pikibo, which are the Maroons. And today for us is Koni Kishibu Kati. It's a full moon of abundance. And we are determined to correct the colonial narrative of Taina extinction in Jamaica. We want the record to show that we acknowledge that the issues presented here today were inherited by an independent Jamaica, and so too the current administration. This hearing was never Waikoil and the Maroon Indigenous Women's Circle versus the state, but has always been Waikoil and the Maroon Indigenous Women's Circle seeking assistance to correct the human rights injustice our ancestors have been subjected to, and that subsequent administrations have ignored until today. So these are not issues that have just arisen, but because there has been nothing legally put in place to protect our communities, they continue. And we are willing and able to respond to the rest if the time is not allotted here in writing.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Immediately, I will give the floor now to the state of Jamaica. They will have this time to present their final opinions.
Okay.
Yes.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam First Vice President. We have listened carefully to the statements made by the petitioners, and we have taken careful note of the comments and questions posed by the commissioners. And just as we had indicated earlier, we will revert in writing in the appropriate manner. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Muy bien, entonces.
Thank you very much. So we're going to end this hearing. I would like to express my thoughts as in my closing words. The importance, which was mentioned by one of these individuals at the table, the importance of you having the support in the Inter-American Commission and have this cooperation, technical cooperation, to seek formula which will allow us to work together to help you in this process. They also mentioned our thematic report about the free to self-determination, self-governance. I want to emphasize that because this was the result of arduous work where a lot of people, a lot of representatives from different peoples, indigenous peoples, had the chance to express to us all of their ideas. And we also had the chance to hear some to some members of the organizations. Now, this report recognizes the history that you have shared with us today, that the treaties from the 18th century actually recognize your rights. That is there. It's been recorded. I believe Commissioner Joel mentioned that in detail about the fact that that is current. The treaties from the 1800 current, and these are norms and regulations that maybe can be implemented in the present. Therefore, we want to offer any help for technical cooperation, the repertoire of indigenous peoples. Maybe we can organize meetings, different sessions, to go into further detail about formula and mechanisms that we can adopt to have an effective work to make your rights a truth. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. Thank you for the work that you are engaged in, your serious commitment to your communities, to your peoples, and that's an important element, important for the defense of the human rights. It's necessary to have you here. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for sharing with us all your testimonials or your ideas, and for continue working the way you have presented to us, seeking this communication with the state, which is crucial to be able to establish this dialogue, a constructive dialogue and productive dialogue, so that we can achieve better results. So again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your presence. Thanks to the audience, of course, for being here present during this hearing. Thank you very much.
Recording.